Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is the second of a 10-part series that we're running, which is called Let's Build Fam. We're working with a lot of different promoters. And I've got the pleasure of working with Gohan and Tom from Running Circle. Bit of a full circle moment here, because when I first started Mimm, Gohan came in the shop maybe 10 years ago or something like that. And we obviously built that bond for over a decade now. And yeah, so Running Circle, obviously an amazing record shop in Nottingham, a staple for Nottingham City. And I thought it'd be great to have Gohan curate this next one. So we've welcomed Dean G. Give him a big clap. So last year we also had the pleasure of inviting Dean Chu, a bit of a legend from Singapore, over, and we did a little session down at Snelton Market, which was sick. And it's really good that we're able to welcome him back and actually get into a little bit more of a deeper conversation in the electronic Asian diaspora, which I don't think gets enough limelight in the UK anyway. I think it's important that we touch on that. Through the series, we will be looking at lots of other different people. The next one we've got with Alfie at the end of the month. That's going to be with Kofi Stone, which will be sick as well. So definitely try and come to that. Same format, conversation, performance afterwards, and we'll be going until probably about 2 o'clock, something like that. But last time when we did it, we kind of had a break. This time we'll go straight into the music. So you guys are welcome to stay and hopefully be able to enjoy all the sets. So without further ado, Gohan, Dean Chu, please come to the stage.
Hello. Thanks everyone for coming over today. It's been a great pleasure to see everyone here. I'm Gohan, and I co-founded Running Circle Records with Tom Towell in 2017. And we were very grateful to be able to launch our shop in 2022. So through the last few years, we've been releasing projects for artists from Nottingham around the world. And it was very special for us to link up with some of the artists and labels we really look up to. Men like Dean Chu and Darker Than Wax. It was very special. And yeah, let's welcome Dean Chu again. So back to Nottingham.
Thank you guys. Hi guys, thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's a bank holiday as well, but yeah, better places to be out there rather than indoors, given the nice weather you finally guys are having in Nottingham. But very, very happy to be back here. I first came here 2 years ago and just somehow really liked the energy of the city as well. So it's kind of brought me back. So yeah, thanks. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, so Dean Chu, when did you arrive in London this time?
Oh yeah, I just came on Thursday actually.
Yeah. You played a couple gigs over there.
Yeah, just finished a gig on Friday in London. So I'm just basically out here in UK and EU for like a month, just doing a little tour.
Nice.
Playing in a few cities around Europe as well. After my UK round.
Nice.
On to Bristol, obviously, after Nottingham.
Yeah.
But yeah, super happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a great time to hang out with you and have you back to Nottingham. Let's talk a little bit about your music history. When did you firstly get into music or DJing?
I think it was really I think Singapore always had that because they always had that sort of like British influences in their music and stuff. So even on commercial radio, there was always like a lot of synth pop that was playing in our airwaves. And we used to have like a really pretty healthy, like in the 80s especially, like there was like, different radio stations playing interesting titles, more so than now, I guess. So I think subconsciously I always like this sort of, electronic form of music without realizing that my ears were already tuned to that. But I think the change really came when I went to Australia, Western Australia to be exact, to study architecture, which is my main profession, if you like. And then discovered independent radio stations, university radio stations, obviously vinyl stores and all that. So that really just opened like a gateway into like music for me. But I think my real entryway was like proper jazz music. like, like different diasporas of the, African American music to its various forms and colors. So that really became like my bedrock, if you like, which informs everything I do today, basically. Yeah.
Was you classically trained, or was it more like a hobby when you just started doing music?
Yeah, I don't have the traditional story of like, oh, my parents listened to great records, because they didn't really listen to records. But as with a lot of typical middle-class Chinese family in Singapore, you are forced to play the piano, and it wouldn't be the kind of piano that you enjoy playing. You'll be like, okay, let's learn the scales, let's do sight reading, right? So you always had a really stern tuition teacher, like almost like wanting to slap your hands if you don't play the scales well. Your mom will be at the back going, yeah, he's playing well right now. He's respectable, right? So
it's the thing with me when I started to learn music.
This is the strain of Asian families, right? Like, it's like, okay, I get it, but I don't. But I mean, what I realized for that was that then it gave me, obviously, because I could sight read and learn my skills, then that gave me, I guess, the sense of harmonics to like time signatures and stuff without even realizing that, right? It goes into you cognitively. And now when I play and when I DJ, I realize even when I was just messing around with my turntables, my vinyls, I always felt that there was a natural way I could understand blending a track, a song into the other without even thinking about genres or categories, because I think it gave me like a mood. It gave me like a point of view in the way I could weave, or, so it really became like that. I realize now, retrospectively looking back, that was really like my background. That's like my roots in a way. Yeah, it's just quite strange. Yeah.
Where did you start your DJing? Was it in Singapore, or was it during your travel to the UK or Australia?
No, it was really during my architecture time in Australia when I discovered all the vinyl shops. Met some DJs here and there. And you start to get curious, and then you bought your first decks, some crummy Denon type stuff, and then you really just started messing around. I was working part-time in the kitchen as well in the university just to like feed my vinyl habit, which was becoming heavily obsessive. That was it basically.
Yeah, just for the last 2 days in London, Ding has already picked like 30 copies of records already.
Yeah, so it's unhealthy. Yeah. I mean, London is just one of those places when you go, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Yeah, you have to know the shop owners for them to be kind to you, so that if you pay cash, you get a better rate.
Yeah, how was the music scene like in Australia back in the early 2000s when you?
Actually, revealing my age now. Yeah, I went in 1996. So, and I never expected Western Australia to have such a vibrant scene, because I think very much like small towns, or small cities, if you like, they probably go more inwards and they do more music and stuff. So they actually had a really interesting hip hop, drum and bass, rave scene, deep house, hip hop, like all sorts. I was surprised. I first saw Carl Craig play in this Masonic Hall in 1998 Perth, and it completely blew my mind. And this is all true stories, or like Carl Cox in his heydays in a 800 packs kind of warehouse with like Salem sticks back then, all like going. So it was really like amazing for me as a 21-year-old guy coming out of Singapore, which is like a matrix. And then having served national service for 2.5 years, mandatory, to go into like that sort of context when you see all these things and go like, wow, this is what I want to be in, So that became my DNA. That was really my DNA, next to architecture, which I really enjoy as well, because I see similarities between architecture and music, because they're all like spatial things, spatial beings. So yeah.
Yeah, and how did you start DJing? Was it in your bedroom first, or?
Oh yeah, just my rented apartment in Perth, just recording my mixes on cassettes. That's how we do it back then. With cassettes. Then I just, back then obviously 56K, right, modem. So you really have to like look for music, hunt for music, MySpace, whatever, So it's the way we dig back, the way we excavate for music back then. I think the process is obviously very different to now. You have more access now, obviously, but I think you seek less. because it's so readily available, as opposed to back then where we literally have to, excavate to see what's there. So, but it increases your learning, and I realize now making the jump from an analog format to a complete digital format now, I realize I have those foundations that I can apply into the context of now, if that makes sense. And that's really interesting. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah,
definitely. And did you meet any friends in Australia, like musical friends at the time?
Yeah. I mean, there was a whole community that was very kind that brought people like us into their community and stuff. It was. Yeah. I mean, some friendships I managed to keep. To now. And
Did
stuff.
you meet Kay back in Australia as well?
No. So Kay, he's the co-founder of my label, Darkening Wax. He's a self-taught musician in Singapore. The only one of the few that's managed to make music as his main profession in Singapore. So we met through another common DJ when I first moved back to Singapore. And then we started jamming together, and it was like a DJ, saxophonist, sort of like hybrid thing. So that really formed the foundations of the music label Darkening Wax. Sorry, I realized we haven't really given any context into what.
For those who don't know, Dean and Kay co-founded Darkening Wax at the beginning. And also, if you watch the Boiler Room video of Dean Chu, you can see the guy who's playing the electric sax on the side. That's Kay. Yeah. He's amazing jazz musician, and he's been supporting the Asian music, underground music scene for so long as well. Yeah. And also, when did you guys start the Darkening Wax?
No, we first had a very basic HTML internet radio. It's almost like pre-NTS kind of vibe. This is like 56K HTML version. And then we started actually sourcing for radio selectors around the world back then because of MySpace and stuff. So I was kind of like doing my rounds, going around Australia, Europe. And then we started collecting like actually a really good group of radio selectors from like Yugoslavia, like ex-Yugoslavia to like Berlin to like some really well-known actually people like Tom Whelan from Legamas, from Compost Records and all this. So we started collecting all this like I don't know, just making friends globally without realizing that we were already doing that. It was just like a natural reach to speak to different people because we were so interested in so many forms of music. And it was called Dance and Soul. Terrible name, but Dance and Soul gave the background for Darkening Wax, because I think with like electronic music, there's not a lot of documentation, at least on the Southeast Asian part of where we are from, or even like global South and whatnot. But there have always been like a underbelly of music culturally in Singapore, electronic music, because in the 70s we have all these hotel lounges, and they always had like a disco bar, like a disco club in all these basement hotels. So basically like a very interesting typology in the Singapore landscape. And some of the air stewards that used to fly SQ, they were buying records from New York. So they're importing like Larry Levan-ish or like Chicago House and all these classics back into Singapore. And then that was really the bedrock of our culture in Singapore, which is why some of you might know Zouk, which is the very famous club in Singapore, a bit like a fabric of Singapore, if you like. The founder was actually an architect, but he had so much fun in Ibiza, so he came back to Singapore and he started Zouk, and he was he used to go to Manchester a lot as well, obviously for all the classic hacienda and all that. So he came from that culture and stuff, and then started Zouk. And then we had like Giles Peterson, Sir Norman J himself, gracing our decks in Singapore, and this was like early 2000-ish. So you can imagine the kind of influences that we have had. But I think all these stories in Southeast Asia were never, I guess, documented, at least from a Western sort of like journalistic lenses and stuff. So I think for most parts, I think a lot of the developments musically, subculturally in Southeast Asia is very much undocumented, at least for Singapore, because we're always known for probably a few things: atrocious human rights law, not able to consume gum, the caning of Michael Fay, the very rebellious American kid who graphed a place and got caned. Right? So we are famous for all those things, for all the wrong reasons. But I think somehow maybe Crazy Rich Asians have in a way kind of skewed, I'm sure you guys will know, skewed that back into our favor somehow in a very strange and humorous way, Sorry, I'm just jiving on to give you context, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So how did you guys generally find your own sound for Darker Than Wax as a label, and also slowly getting to the global music scene and connecting with artists around the world?
No, that's a great question. I guess because Kay and I have always been so influenced by American jazz music, everything that revolves around improvisation speaks to us. So even the music that we seek out to put out on Darker Than Wax, it needs to have that kind of groove, that very raw elemental groove, right? And trance aside, like it could be a deep house track, it could be like a really experimental hip hop track next to maybe even a dancehall inspired thing. To us, it doesn't really matter the categories, but what matters is that kind of slippery sort of factor, the kind of rawness in that music. And obviously, we share a lot of resonance and similarities between the scenes in New York and especially London, because there's all these crossover of like broken beat to like jazz to like house not house, jazz not jazz kind of stuff. Everything was all sort of meshed. And I guess through that we just sort of merged and created all these points and intersections between different people. That's how, and obviously one thing led to the other.
Yeah, and it's so nice to see that you guys been supporting, especially Asian artists, people like Munir, myself, Uno. Lots of new talents that are coming out from Asia at the moment. How do you guys approach this kind of? How do you guys curate the releases? Like, what's the most important thing to look after in the release or in the artist?
I mean, I think there's various ways of running a record label. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. Obviously, a lot of hours put into different sectors of the label, from understanding the product of the artist, having a more personal relationship with the artists. So much like my man Kane over there, sitting quietly over there, great producer as well. So using his project as a case study, is really very much about talking to the artist, understanding his or her approach and whatnot, of their approach, and realizing what it speaks and how it speaks to them, and we're able to extract the essence of that and use that as a way to navigate everything around the release, whether it's the press release to how you communicate, the artwork and everything else. So everything is like an ecosystem. So it takes a lot of time. And obviously we work with K7, which is our press and distribution, our distributor. So it's a multifaceted kind of thing that's actually full-time, which is obviously next to the other full-time things that we all have. So we're really just putting our time and effort into this, to label, all of us in the team, just because we believe in the product, So, yeah.
And also Darker Than Wax has been throwing parties in Singapore and also around Asia, I guess, for many, many years. There was a very famous party called Brew started by you guys, and it was phenomenal in Singapore. Could you dive a little bit more into the party? How do you guys start it, and what's the idea behind it?
No, Brew was just in a party in a courtyard of this very trendy coffee place, but in a very sort of slightly grimy, seedy neighborhood district in Singapore called Jalan Besar. So it really started so they had a courtyard with an concrete sort of island counter with like a cactus. So I thought that setting was very interesting, given my architecture. Kind of like I can't stop thinking about it when I see a space and I go like, now something can happen. So and the owner is like a really good friend. I said, hey, it'd be really nice to do a lazy Saturday afternoon kind of like final session there, right? So it started just like us moving our own system there, like some 7, 8 years ago, I want to say. And then it grew organically into this 400 pax party once a month. It's become almost like a very cult type of party that people come to. And it resulted in us actually eventually working with the government to closing a section of the street next to the coffee shop and turning it into an actual block party in 2019 before COVID. So Brew was pretty well known in a lot of circles. I think even a lot of the musicians or DJs from London, when they saw that, they're like, wow, that looks like a vibe in Singapore.
Looks really
It's crazy. It was crazy, yeah.
So how long you guys been doing it for? 7, 8 years?
Yeah, 7, 8 years. Before, I think now it's very hard. Like, I guess like London, it's quite hard to get licenses for outdoor events, particularly where there's music and alcohol involved and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, what's the situation like in Singapore for late night license or just generally putting on music events?
It really depends. You could go really grey and just do everything without licenses in the proper way, or you could really just be quite dogmatic and just kind of fill in the blanks and apply and stuff. But there's a lot of red tape in our system. Like, it's very bureaucratic. Every department you need to speak to, you need to get a specific license. So it's not really centralized. And they always view, I guess, music culture as something that's a bit like, there must be this involved, there must be that involved. So I think they're still in a continuous process of letting go and realizing, like, all these subcultural components have great economical value because it aids tourism. Which kind of leads to my other project, Off Track, which is like a little listening bar that we opened just slightly post-COVID. A bit like a Brilliant Corners in London, just because we were inspired by all that kind of facets of like the whole Japanese-inspired kisses and all that. But we realized that during COVID, there was an exodus of like all these music spaces in Singapore simply because it was COVID, right? So I realized there might be a void in maybe having a space that felt more safe and more like a social space for different types of communities to come through what we have already been doing in Dark and Wax, what I have been doing with my architecture practice, which is full-time, by the way, as well, because I have already been designing bars and restaurants for the last 10 years or so. So I had the kind of know-how on how to run a place in a way. So I started developing the idea with another partner and then pitching to people who might want to be potential investors. And then 2.5 years later, we have a physical bar called Off Track in Singapore that's just about to get Asia 50 best bar as well in a span of 2 years. So thank you. It's been a crazy ride, but we realized that every city needed a space like almost like a little beacon for communities, creative communities and beyond to sort of converge, and we realize obviously everyone loves food, a bit of drinks, but music as the kind of center of the whole experience with good design, good lighting, good touch points, and then we realized there was a moment for us to insert that into Singapore. Yeah. So I'm just sort of digressing because I think everything that we've been doing, or at least I've been doing, they're all like interrelated. So I can't talk about one without the other. So apologies, it all starts to feel like a bit of a collage, but yeah.
No, at all. Yeah, let's maybe talk a little bit more about your architecture background. Was your family all doing architecture as well, right?
Yeah. I come from a family of architects. There was never any pressure, although maybe there was some. I wanted to be an illustrator at first because I could really pick up a pen and draw comics as young as I was 6. So my mom was always dishing me out. But then I realized back then in the 80s, becoming a full-time illustrator probably wasn't the most financially safest or feasible way to go, as opposed to now where maybe because you can brand yourself as a multi-hyphenate, things are different, right? We don't have the luxury back then and stuff. But so I realized, okay, fine. Architecture might be the middle ground. You have the art side, but you also have the structure side. Well, the structure side, So I took that on. And started working in apprenticeships and like in traditional architecture firms, and I realized I didn't want to just work for another 10 years just to be a partner, because you can see your trajectory. Okay, you work, you become a junior partner, you become a partner, you become an associate, but you're always kind of working for someone else and not sort of translating your own point of view or energies. So I worked for like maybe 4 years out of that, went to Jakarta to work with my dad because he works there with his architecture firm. That's when I really learned the ropes of organizing a team, like running projects on time and all these fundamentals of being an architect, which I'm very grateful for because those were pivotal periods for me to learn, okay, if you want to run your own practice your way, you still have to have fundamentals that should be this way. So that kind of showed me like the organizational side of whatever you do, which really has helped me in the way I pursue my creative pursuits, whether it's my DJing to my off track to Darknet X
Yeah. How has architecture sort of influenced or affected of your thinking in music or spatial design or in daily life?
Yeah. I think maybe using the example of the late, great Virgil Abloh, I think because he came from an architecture engineering background, Virgil is like an architect thinking about everything. He uses that as his kind of point of view as a framework for applying it into graphic design, music, really, it doesn't matter what he does, right? Like, but I find that really interesting because I think architecture gives you the kind of very lateral point of view because it taps into politics. There's a political side, there's a sociological side, there's almost like a kind of neurological side because it's about behaviors in space. So architecture obviously isn't just about buildings, columns, like mullions. Of course, it's all that, but fundamentally it's something that is like the glue that holds people's behaviors together in a space. So when I realized that, when I made the jump, like, I don't know, I don't remember, but I realized then it's really about designing conditions that I would say dictate, but shape the behaviors of us in the space. So I'm very curious about that because music does that to all of us, right? Like it kind of destroys all the categories and brings everyone together. So it has the same kind of way to define behaviors, at least for a certain period of time. And I realized music architecture has the same kind of effect and stuff. So to me, like design is music, is architecture, is DJing, all kind of like, almost like cooking is the same thing, right? There's a sequence, it's space, it's rhythm, it's speed, it's when you put in the vegetable, how fast you do a stir fry. It's the same kind of approach, Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy for people like me to see Ding doing all the things at the same time. He's designing, he's doing spatial design, he's DJing, he's traveling all around the world, he's running his restaurant. Yeah, it's just like crazy. Yeah.
I'm just bored. I think I'm just restless. That's all I know what to do. And after that, I just plug out and go for my nature walk.
How does it feel like to working with different clients around the world with different cultural backgrounds or cultural contexts?
Well, most of my work have just been based in Singapore, a bit regionally, but during COVID, a client from Saudi Arabia, of all places in Jeddah, reached out because I think they're in the midst of like doing different concepts around their B2B, B2C brands, coffee brands, so like specialty concept restaurants and stuff. And they reached out, and then at first I thought, this is really random. And then just what became like evolved from a Zoom call became like almost like a retainer sort of consultancy with them, helping them to design their almost like a spatial design guides for their different concepts and brands. So that's really allowed me to sort of respond to like very different sort of cultural behaviors and expectations and stuff. It's very enriching for me personally, just be able to have a chance to work across all these different types of projects in different places and stuff. But again, the client, he's also very young, but I think it's very interesting right now because a lot of the newer sort of like generational clients, they're all like very much tap into things that we all like now, like music, food, good design, like the way of like doing businesses, maybe it could be more ethical or whatnot and stuff. So it's a very interesting time to be working as a spatial designer, in different types of like societies and whatnot, realizing there's a common thread that governs all these things together. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you've been traveling and also doing the design and music at the same time. How do you find it? Do you find it difficult to balance, or do you, or do you enjoy the sort of chaos sometimes? Yeah.
No, I like the pain. I definitely like the pain. I think the pain puts me in place. But also, I used to run a 10-man firm in my previous practice before COVID. And now, obviously, I run a remote consultancy, which is great right now. I don't have to pay like all the overheads and worry about getting 10 projects just to pay for the rent of my office. So I work with 2 designers that they help me out on a project basis. So I'm able to really like keep everything very streamlined, and obviously making sure the designers get paid fairly for their work as well and stuff. So it's a very nice sort of collaborative sort of practice I have right now that allows me to really just be extremely remote. So being able to multitask that way between the different facets is almost very natural to me now, because I realize I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. I don't quite know what other ways I can do this except this. This is like the way I know, I'm able to just go A, B, C, D, then I go back. I'm just able to tap in and out that way. But at the same time, still take an insane amount of music for like gigs, averaging like maybe 4 gigs a month, or like playing a lot more now regionally and internationally now that I've signed with a UK agency as well, which kind of came last year. So it's quite nice. It's quite nice. It's quite nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to see that you brought Darker Than Wax from Singapore to the globe, and also your own designing consultancy agency, John. What's your secrets to connect with the world from Asia or from Singapore?
I don't know. I think it's having that, I guess, the kind of global mindset. Like you're once global but very local. You're just kind of like in this sort of zone where, I don't know. I just guess I always am curious about things, right? So I think sometimes it's also, if you project goodwill, if you're willing to be curious and learn and sort of like share your point of view globally across different places with the things that you are passionate about and that you work for, and you realize that all these other communities across different worlds can also resonate with you, and you realize that the struggles are actually the same. Even in London or Nottingham or wherever, you realize, oh my God, you guys are actually having the same challenges. You guys are actually paying as much. It's getting more expensive. Like all these things that you realize, oh my God, it's real. It's this thing that we're all like in together. It's real, but I think that's also the beautiful part about the creative process, in whatever process or journey that you all might be in. I think it's important to sort of find that sort of common intersections. I find those things to be very nourishing. Yeah.
Definitely. Do you have more plans to come back to the UK for more gigs or works in the future as well? Yeah,
I just generally enjoy the UK because I have family in London. I mean, I've been in and out of London ever since like the early 2000s, when I witnessed the gentrification of the slow decay of Shoreditch into the beast that it is now, next to the inevitable gentrification of Peckham into something interesting as well. But all these are different parts of London that I enjoy. But so I've always been quite indebted culturally and musically to London, because it defined a lot of what I am right now with Dark and Wax, the off track and all this stuff. So in a nutshell, I like to spend more time, given that now the agency I'm in a position with the agency where I can obviously get work permits, short-term work permits and all that. That allows me to stay here for 3 months. Why not? I mean, I love it here. It's like I just feel so natural in my natural state when I'm here, because it's so multiracial and just so easy. I mean, Singapore's multiracial, but not. It's a bit like a construct. There's still a lot of deep layers of racism and all that, all the things that we talk about. So it's very conflicting as well. I mean, I think every place has its own sort of conflicting positions. I just feel more at ease here, where certain things just don't really matter. Like if I have some weed, yeah.
What's the music scene in Singapore like nowadays?
It's great. Post-COVID, it has become this. It has exploded because we realized those 4 years, there's all these younger generations just in their bedrooms, just like expressing themselves. And you really see the explosion of all this younger generation, very Gen Z inspired, sort of like queer culture and spaces, all like doing their own little sub pockets and stuff. It's amazing, and you see a lot of parties. Obviously, a lot of people revenge partying, revenge spending and stuff. But I think generally, Singapore has also evolved into a really fluid place. And for me, obviously being a much older person, having gone through different cycles now, and being in this particular junction, looking at this is fascinating. It's fascinating. It's like the younger generation is fascinating in Singapore. Like such a different energy, and you learn so much from that energy, right? That's why I'm still very much embedded in the scene, because I'm seeing like a renaissance in Singapore right now. I guess that's why Off Track has a reason to be there now.
Definitely.
It's become like almost like a glue for people to kind of converge. Yeah.
Is there any artists or DJs from Singapore nowadays, especially, you would recommend everybody to check it out?
Yeah, there's really a lot. I mean, there's the crew like Super Enjoy. They're really interesting. They do a lot of more of the kind of like interesting tech house or like deep techie electronic stuff. A bunch of like younger guys, and just kind of like messing about. Very interesting. Like there's actually a rapper from Singapore. Super interesting. He's called Mary Sue. MarySue. Very interesting, because he's combined like elements of like Mad Villain, a bit of Slumvy, but very slippery, kind of like, sort of like poetry almost, but in a kind of not Singlish, but in a kind of like Singaporean kind of humor, like urban, like a critique on, like our system. And he's kind of actually, I won't say blown up, but he's actually become quite revered in like certain sort of hip hop scenes. I would say definitely check his music out, because the boy can go. The boy can go, and really good. Like I would say check Mary Sue out. Very interesting. Very interesting cat. I got my eye on right now. Like I have so much love for that guy. But so many, like there's Novi Social Club doing very interesting stuff. Subsidy, which is like a long established drum and bass collective in Singapore. They're still upholding like proper jungle in Singapore. They brought Tim Reaper over. Brought a lot of like Coco Bryce. So there's been a lot of exchanges in Singapore. Like whether on the house side, we've done like muscle cars as well. Lefto comes over quite often. So we have a really healthy scene in Singapore right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see what's happening in Singapore. It's really a lot, like musically, that's happening right now.
And so Southeast Asia in general as well.
For the matter. In Indonesia, lots of the places. Yeah, it's really popping up right now. Is there any venues or any spots you would say that's very influential at the moment in Singapore or Southeast Asia?
I want to say Bangkok. I'm not so sure whether you guys have been to Never Normal. Never Normal is like this club space that evolved during COVID, because there was a Bangkok law, the lockout law, where during COVID, where if you're not home by 1 a.m., you're basically locked out already. Like, so you almost have to find a place to like hide to like 6 a.m. and then you get home when the lockout laws open up. So I think through that, these music guys, all the DJs and stuff, and a lot of them are sound engineers, started building their own space 14 minutes outside of Bangkok into this sort of like vertical commune with an art gallery on the ground floor, with a club on the top floor, all insulated with local Bangkok-built speakers. And then it just became this cult club space that's called Never Normal. So I had the privilege to play there in November last year, and it was honestly quite spectacular. Like one of the rawest sort of like parties I've ever played for, to like 250 like people, and very local sort of community, which is very important as well. But unfortunately, as with Bangkok, because it's very much based on tokenships and, like deals with the cops and the general sort of areas where the cops protect the area and stuff. I think they kind of raise the rent every year, but unfortunately it's reached to a point where they can't justify paying the kind of hike in the fees. So it looks like it might be closing soon. Yeah. But I would say if you guys, happen to be visiting Bangkok in the next maybe 4 or 5 months, if you're there, make your way to Never Normal. It's actually quite unique.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. There was also quite a few listening bars that's been going around in Asia and also around the world lately, right? Like Brilliant Corners, they were one of the first ones that started doing the kind of jazz kizar style in London, and they really brought the culture like to the worldwide. What would you think? Because Off Track obviously was influenced by the culture as well, but also Off Track's not really like a conventional listening bar. It's like a very unique space with lots of fresh ideas. What do you think is like the most crucial factors when people want to interpret the listening bar idea into their own city? What do you think people should be careful, or what they should be focusing on?
No, that's a great question. I wish I have images to show you how Off Track looks like. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But I think the whole kisa and the listening bar thing has been overused, in my opinion, right now. Very much like a natural wine bar where, it's like 1 year of natural wine, and then it's like the trend, and suddenly everyone's opening a natural wine bar. So it's almost like that in a way. And I'm not being cynical. I just think that's such a natural progression. So I think it needs to also move beyond that sort of like Pinterest layer of like a listening bar, So I think there's that kind of look now where, there's the vinyl wall, there's 2 Devon Oges cabinet speakers on the left and right, I mean, that's great, don't get me wrong. I think overall spectrum, I think spaces have become more well intentionally designed. There's a greater sense of experience. I think that's great for the general ethos. But I think it can also run the risk of becoming very trendy for the sake of just running trendy. And then when you go to the space, you realize there's certain things that aren't maybe actually done well. They haven't taken care of the acoustics. The lighting's too much in your face. Like everything is just not really considered. So on a certain level, it works, but on certain levels, it doesn't. So I think it's about really getting to the core of what a listening experience is, and you shape your design and your programming around that. So Off Track is not really like a kisa per se. I wouldn't even suggest that. I think that would be very hypocritical of me, because kisa is really a different thing altogether. I would say it's just a collection of all the experiences I have gained through all my years of travel, looking at spaces, whether it's Japan to Barcelona to Vienna or wherever, or just like accumulation of like a sketchbook. And I realized I just want to encapsulate certain elements of those experiences into a space, into this found space. It used to be a grimy KTV bar before Off Track. That really gave it more color, because I was like, yo, this is great. And I kept the sort of like disc light, sort of pendant lights that they had, and I changed its colors, and it became like this very Instagrammable feature, which never, it always helps, right, with business. But it's really realizing about that point of view again. So I want to go back to the very idea of point of view. What is your point of view? What is your comment on this thing? How do you view that particular situation, and how do you apply your methodology to that benefits like a certain space and the people in it and stuff, right? So I think it goes back to that, I think, yeah. Maybe this sounds very naive, but I guess running a business is like you almost have to navigate between so many strains of being just a truly capitalistic business as opposed to, I guess, one with more social sort of agenda where you can kind of create conditions for, like a slightly more interesting way of practicing businesses, if you like, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of KTV, I'm very interested to know more about what's the KTV like back in the 70s in Singapore.
Man, I wouldn't even know, because that was when I was born. But I mean, KTVs in Singapore, there's a kind of very interesting culture where it's called, in Hokkien means 吊灰. It means like you're hanging a flower. So like in a lot of these Thai influenced kind of like KTV bars and like local Chinese bars, it's about like this performer, female performer going up to a little platform and they do like a dance. I mean, nothing revealing, but it's obviously a rather sort of like, certain situation. And then you have this sort of like, male patrons, predominantly male patrons, drinking and enjoying the presence of all these women. Yeah. So that's like the KTV kind of like style that's governed like the clubland, the other clubland in Singapore as well, like the kind of approved vice industry, if you like. Yeah. But through that, it has its own sort of colors and character and it's a kind of architecture to that as well, which is, it can be interesting if you dissect certain sort of like elements, if you like, because that really forms like the neon lights and stuff, which is very much like in a lot of parts of Southeast Asia, like Asia Pacific, like Hong Kong, like Singapore. I think we're all like very attracted by the traditional neon lights because we came from that kind of like city where it's like neon lights, like certain kind of design and signboards. So I guess we also want to mimic that sort of experiences and that kind of feeling into like a space like Off Track because I want to bring that back, like I could imagine that KTV kind of like cabaret sort of, so it almost has a kind of retro but slightly future modern sort of attitude to it. Yeah,
I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
And what kind of songs people usually sing in KTV, do you think?
Oh man,
lots of like Mandarin
Singaporeans right there. Yeah, they would know Singaporeans. But just a lot of just like happy songs, man. Just like in different dialects. Predominantly a lot of Hokkien, obviously, because that's like the traditional. I guess like the majority dialect within Singapore, Hokkien. You have your Teochew, obviously the Cantonese as well, Hakkas. But Hokkien is like quite, I would say, quite dominant. Like a dominant sort of like, yeah.
Was like 80s, 90s, like Hong Kong disco thing in the KTV as well?
Yeah, very much. Like I think that in the 70s and 80s, actually there were a lot of good music being played in our airwaves, like all the cancel disco pop and stuff was very trendy, because they all had their sort of American influences into their music as well. So it was a very prolific, which is why now like on Discogs, and if you look at obviously a channel like my Analog Journal, they celebrated more of the whole sort of rare city pop Asian sort of music, because in the same timeline back then, people were already dabbling with the same type of music that the West were dabbling in, but obviously no one knew that they were all doing the same thing, right? So there's a lot more of the renewed interest in Asian music that was made during the 70s and 80s. And now actually going into the 90s, obviously with the resurgent, the renewed interest of UK street soul, if you like. But there's also that kind of street soul of in Asia as well.
Yeah. I definitely found a similarity between UK street soul and lots of the 90s Hong Kong music. Yeah. For those who haven't checked out Ding's set on my Analog Journal, Ding played an amazing set with, I think, all the music's from Asia back in 70s, 80s, right?
Yeah, 70s, 80s. Predominantly Indonesia, bits of Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, of course, as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing set. Would highly recommend. Shall we? What time is it? 8:20. Yeah. Shall we? I don't know if you guys have any questions for tonight. Anything?
Throw it.
Yeah.
Converse or whatever, but I don't know whether it's.
What's your favourite city apart from Nottingham?
Sorry.
What's your favourite city after Nottingham? Because obviously Nottingham must be your favourite city.
Well, London's still my number one friend city. Sorry, but Nottingham is like very close. I was saying, not just saying for the sake of being polite. I haven't been to many others. I'm heading to Bristol on Thursday, and I personally am very interested in Bristol. Firstly, because of its music tradition, but also because of some of the brutalist architecture that they have there. That I'm basically very obsessed with brutalism, especially in the UK.
Brutalism. You know where it comes from? Brutalism.
Please.
So Betongoed means
Betongoed, yes.
betongoed means raw cement. Supergoed became brickless.
There you go.
That's all I know.
No, that was the example.
Much about his architecture.
That's good.
I just wanted to say thanks for being here. And first of all, also Mimm Studios for hosting us here. As someone who's coming from the Asian diaspora, I feel it's very inspiring to meet someone who's been in the industry for a while and also trying to create a community. So and being also so transparent about sharing. So.
I appreciate you all just taking your time out, being here and sharing ideas and just, thank you so much.
I don't know if I missed this at the beginning, but I'd love to know when that transition happened from coming from an architecture background, but also finding this love of music and quite a niche subset of music as well. And just connecting those dots for yourself and thinking, this is something I can pursue as well as all these other parts that I find interesting. I think that's such a challenging thing to be like, I like all these three different things. How do I make it into one seamless, cohesive passion? I'd love to know the journey or the thought process that kind of led you to that.
Oh, great. That was great question. I think it actually came in routine. When I realized, because, as you would, in the music world, you're susceptible to partying, overindulging, drinking, and all that, we all enjoy that. But I think I eventually hit a stage in my mid-30s when I realized I was still doing all that, but DJing so much that I almost burnt out because I was really doing a lot at the same time. And obviously discovering myself, right? Because as a creative, I think it's a lifelong process. You're almost like a baby in your mid-30s when you think you know it all, but actually you don't know anything, right? So I was also at that crux. So I realized I needed to switch my routine. And I've always loved exercising because I played basketball competitively in school and stuff. So I always had that side of me where I realized that I need to balance my routine and really have a more sound practice. Sleeping earlier, exercising, being more mindful of the way your body acts and stuff. And I think as soon as I made that switch, right, I realized that it really helped me with the way I work, the way I can organize my thoughts and be more calm and form a framework for the way I work. And I think that's the way you could then maybe start to provide answers of how you can combine it together. So it wasn't like me sitting out going, I'm going to try to consciously merge these things together. I was doing all these without knowing I was merging, but I realized I needed a routine to give me a clearer state of mind to know how to combine those things together, if that makes sense.
But it feels like another level to be able to do that when you're also quite nomadic as well. Because let's say you're in Australia and you're figuring this stuff out and you're getting it together. But then to go to London, to be changing time zones and things like that, what are some things that for you have really helped you maintain that routine regardless of where you are?
Rough work. I've been meditating on and off for almost 25 years, but it's a strange process. It's a strange process, but whatever it is, for the 25 years, I realized it's helped me to really observe the way I breathe and stuff, and I become more and more in tune with that, and also paying more attention to the neurological aspect of my well-being, realizing that it all starts from there. So maybe trying to have your circadian rhythms, trying to put your phone away, trying to do all these things that I think would help you with your being. So wherever I go, I have that almost obsessive routine. I need to have my half an hour, 45 minutes of stretches or certain type of fast exercises that increases my heart rate, for example, just to have that. And then have my fiber, my fruits, my hydration. I've been a vegetarian for 15 years. I recently got back to eating fish again because I need my quick protein fix, which is very essential for the brain as well. But I realized those things are very important for any line of work, whether you're creative, non-creative, whatever, but you need that framework. And because you'll stop you being a procrastinator, which eventually all of us can be, because there's one thing to be talented, there's one thing to have taste, but it's another to execute all this with finesse and discipline. Is all. That's what I learned in 48 years of my life.
And I imagine that probably your military service,
Oh yeah.
like
100% he would know. You can't say no. What you gonna do if you say no? He just tell you to drop 20. You drop 20, like, and he will just say, "Fuck you." Like, I'm gonna go. And back in my time, the welfare isn't as great as now. Now, if that person so touches this person, that person will say, "My instructor abused me," so they can't do that anymore. Back in my time, it was racist. You really see the colors of the different types of societies in there. They never had their break in normal society because we realized that divide. And the army, you had everything thrown at you. Like you had your ego, everything completely stripped out of you when you're 19. And I think that's where the Singapore system has excelled amazingly at suppressing your other self when you're at 19. Because all you want to do is 19, be free, express, be creative. Not, you're going straight to like that, crushed. And by the time you get out 21, you're like programmed. Which is why going to Australia was my way of releasing my third eye, because it was like I needed that. So if I didn't go there, I don't think any of this would have happened. I don't think I'll actually be here, which is quite crazy to say right now. So I'm actually really grateful to my parents for actually kicking me to Australia, because it was like very much against my wishes. But when I was there, I realized, wow, there you go. Yeah, I think it's framework. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can I just follow on from that? So you finished out of the army, and what was your plan when you, at that point, or was it your parents who decided after your experience you need to go somewhere else? Was that your decision or theirs?
It was mutual. Because I was always quite restless as a person. I really sucked in math, science, and all that stuff, chemistry. I have absolutely zero interest in all those things. So I just shared with my parents, hey, I could go into chemical engineering. I could go into computer science. Computer science was like the thing back then. It was like a tech thing back then. I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. 1 and zeros, C+ programming. I don't care about that. All I care about is like Gundam and like collecting comics and like reading about whatever, right? Like architecture sounds cool. I can draw really well. So we seek a middle ground. I wanted to go to Melbourne because I knew it was more exciting because no one knew about Perth. So it was half. We met in the middle. And I wasn't getting along particularly well with my mom. And my dad realized I need to kick this guy away. True story, no.
What was the biggest hurdle as an Asian artist trying to break into a European market? And is there any advice that you would give to anyone, regardless of where they are or where they come from, but if they're trying to break that barrier to be able to get into those industries?
Mentally it can be draining, because I think Singapore, first and foremost, we came from a place where we can't actually shed our colonial background. We always had that colonial background because obviously we have always been a British colony from way back. That's our DNA. So I think when you can't shed your sense of colonialism in a way, it really plays with you sometimes. And you realize how are you able to just navigate this situation and kind of forge a kind of sport for yourself, right? So you question yourself, and you add that to the Asian sort of post-Confucianist sort of ideas in you, where you're like, can I really do this? Right? But I don't know, man. I think it's really about tapping into your instinctive self and making certain calls when you think that makes sense, and you go with that. I'm being able to always kind of do that in a way, realizing, hey, something's kind of telling me, hey, this way could be okay. But that's not to say that it's okay and you leave it there and you don't nourish it and you don't work. Of course you still work, right? But you gotta go with it sometimes that way. Yeah. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Can I just add, Mark? sense what you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my observations from Ducken and Wax, the history of Ducken and Wax and your like prolific past, I feel like you've always been just championing the local and just focusing on in Singapore itself and not always thinking about how can I break out into other markets, how can I go to Europe, how can I do this. It's just like being comfortable with where you are, and then from there like other markets can like observe this sort of like realness, this OG-ness, and then you just like transfer on from there. Like there's no like persistence to like, oh, how can I break into Europe and all that. Yeah. Because just, you know, Singapore the home base and just like championing all the local acts and thinking about the local audiences. Yeah.
Thank you. And well, through that, becoming like a rather global thing, right? With like Marco doing Dark Networks New York and New York, running a lot of radio and all that. So,
Mark's brother.
sorry,
I thought I'd like to ask you something you've never been asked before. Who's your favourite Mark's brother?
Mark's brother.
Rancho Chico, is that right? Harpo, Rancho.
Sorry, I'm lost.
Betting, so
All right.
throw you a curveball. Who's your favourite Mark's brother?
I have no clue.
You know, you're going to ask, do you know the Marx?
I don't know the Marx brother. I don't know. I'm sorry, man. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. All right, sorry, man. I don't know everything, which is great. Yeah. I love not knowing. So thank you, man. Thank you. You seem to know more than me, so thank you, man. Thank you for schooling me. I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, I appreciate that. We can have a chat about that later. When we're up for the shit, I don't even know. So that's the complete curveball.
Any more questions, everyone?
You were mentioning about you're talking about like the younger generation now in Singapore and like all these new collectives like Strange Weather and stuff like sort of pushing the underground behind closed doors scenes that came out of like COVID, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how like you feel Darker and Wax can progress from here, like whether I assume it's more like collaboration than competition, like all these like smaller like this, but how do you feel like Darker and Wax can go on from here with the future?
I think just because we've been so firmly entrenched in Singapore for so long, we're almost like a legacy label where, you know, it's like an OG, you know, they've been there. So I think, but it's just constantly about maybe working with younger, fresher minds as well, just so that we can learn off those energies and knowledge and skill sets. And obviously doing collaborative parties or events with like-minded collectives like Ice Cream Sundays, you know, all those guys, I'm sure you know as well. So we really see ourselves as that, you know, like just being very porous, you know, like celebrating every pocket as well, because we really grew from that, where even in the 90s we were exposed to a slightly more egalitarian, so, you know, everything is quite the same, you know. Yeah, so it's very interesting to see all of them coming out now. Yeah, like Endless Return, Rampic Goddess, you know, like all those guys, like Strange Weather obviously being the forefront of the more experimental scene. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we have time for another question. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Bin Chu.